So you might be somebody that's looking to put their first song together. Maybe you've been playing for a little while, or you've been playing covers in the band and you're looking to start producing original material. Maybe you've been playing for a long time and you're just struggling to put your riffs together. Maybe you're someone that's pretty adept with music theory and you've just hit a roadblock with how you're constructing songs and you might need to take it back to some basics. So I recently tackled this in brief videos on shorts on my socials, but I figured I'd make one cohesive video where we can tackle this more in depth together. So using one simple step in this video, I'm going to show you how to take a song from start to finish using one simple riff. And the best thing about this method that I use for creating my music and my songs is you don't need to have a working knowledge of music theory at all, but we'll go over the basics of what you do need in this video. So this is going to be more beneficial if you're already at home and you've started experimenting with home recording, but it's not to say that you can't use these steps to do it without. So if you're not currently recording onto DAW, this might be something you want to look into, as it will help build your songs. So I'm going to demonstrate how we can take the most simple riff on the planet and we can turn it into something that sounds huge. So for the sake of continuity, I'll use the same examples that I use in the short videos to go through this. So I'll keep this basic for the ones of you that aren't quite adept with music theory and stuff, but you do not need to have a solid working knowledge of music theory. You just need to understand what works and why it works. Okay, so we'll take a very simple pattern that's available to us, that's available in many scales. I'll come back to this in the video. So there we have a G, an A and an A sharp. Very boring by itself, isn't it? So we can turn that into power chords. The other thing we've got is the octaves, where it's the same note, but just higher. So what we can do is we can start moving stuff around. So rather than starting the first note on here, rather than having your roots there, you can have it on the octave. Already sounds a bit more mysterious than just having a... So you could picture that as your main melody, with the power chords behind it. So that transferred to a basic recorded riff on your DAW. So you can see when stuff's recorded, you get a much better idea of how this stuff will sound in a song, as opposed to just noodling in your bedroom. Things always sound a lot better when they're put into context. So for the way I go about starting my songs is I just come to the table with one riff. So you might have just been noodling at home, you've come across something, just noodling. So the next thing we want to do before we start writing any riffs blindly is we need to figure out what key that's in. And that's very simple to do, even if you haven't got a working knowledge of music theory. So to make sure that all the riffs that we're coming up with are coherent and work together, we need to make sure that they're in the correct key. To let you into the biggest secret in songwriting for metal, most metal songs are written in very few keys. The biggest of them are being Phrygian dominant, Phrygian itself, Aeolian, and diminished mainly. You've heard musicians or YouTubers using terms like the Mixolydian scale in their videos. It's simply a pattern from a scale. Now all these are modes of particular scales, so they're basically just patterns that are in, whether it's the harmonic minor scale, etc., etc. But you don't need to know that, you just need to know what the shapes look like and sound like, and you can take it from there. For this example, I'm just going to use Phrygian dominant, as I know that the riff that I've come up with is in Phrygian dominant. So if we were playing that scale pattern across one note on the fretboard, so let's go for the E string, so we'd be in E Phrygian dominant, it would sound like this. So for my song, I'm in A Phrygian dominant, so you can just follow that pattern on the next string. So the next thing that you want to do is you maybe want to get a little screenshot online from Google of a few of these patterns to work out what they sound like. And you could just take a pattern from there. So the next step for you maybe is to take a few of these examples from Google, maybe screenshot them just so you've got an idea of what these patterns sound like. So the next step for you is we want to figure out which of those patterns that your riff is going to fit in. So for pure example, you might have something quickly that's so you might be looking at a particular map that you've downloaded, might be Phrygian dominant for etc. And you now need to manipulate that to fit where your riff fits. So if you're coming across your pattern like what we've just demonstrated, we simply need to find where that group of notes is on that map, and we need to move it up the fretboard or down the fretboard. So you keep going. If you were in E, go to G sharp, G, etc. So you keep moving down until that pattern fits where your riff is. Now, once you've done that, you know which scale you're going to be working with. Now, the riff you might have come up with might not necessarily be the root notes for that scale, but it doesn't matter because it's in the scale, it's going to work. So once we've established that the pattern that we want to use for the song, the one that you like the sound of the most, and you know where the root note is, the best thing to do now is start building some riffs off your roots note. Now that we have a few basis riffs to work from, and we've got the map of the entire fretboard where we're allowed to include root notes, we can start building other riffs that don't start on the root note. So you might be thinking when you're looking at this map that you've downloaded that the notes in your power chords aren't in the map at all. You don't need to worry about that. So a power chord is simply two notes harmonizing, and in the case of the power chord, it's just done with what's known as the perfect fifth. So if you have your power chord on your 5th fret of the E string, our A power chord, the 5th note from A is E, so A, B, C, D, E, and that's just how power chords work. So you won't necessarily find that second note in your power chord in these scales. All we need to know is that we're working off the root note. So any notes that you see on your map, you can turn that into a power chord. So if we're treating our song as a completely blank canvas, what we want to do is we want to make sure that our palette's as varied as possible. We can do that by creating some riffs and some melodies which don't necessarily include the root note. So now you just want to enrich your options. You might want to come up with some thrash style riffs that come off the root note, some thrash style riffs that don't come off the root note. You might want to start making melodies that do and don't, etc, etc. Just build as much riffs as you possibly can. So it doesn't matter if a lot of these riffs don't sound very similar. There are ways that we can come up with some cohesion so they work together in the song. So to come back as to why we should start figuring out what key we're in before we start writing riffs aimlessly, I'm going to showcase an example. So an intro style riff that I came up with sounded something a bit like this. I quickly discovered that note along wasn't available in the map, but what we can do, if we're looking at the map for A Phrygian dominant, we'll find that the third note along, C sharp. So what we can do is, rather than play that as a standard power chord, we can play that as an inverted power chord. So because that's not the actual root note, this is your root note, we can use that instead and we'll get the same effect. It's just another way of manipulating the scale to fit your riffs. So the best thing about having this map with the key available to us is you can start being creative in areas that you wouldn't have been able to be in previously. You might have been one of these people that really struggled with quieter riffs and sort of building chords with very nice embellishments in there. And if we don't have a sound working knowledge of how music theory works, we can start using our ears instead of our head to create these embellishments. Simply find what notes are available on the pattern and start adding them into your harmonies and stuff, seeing what works, what sounds good to you. So now that you're coming up with your bass riffs, what you want to do is build off all of those riffs and create more riffs that are very similar to further again broaden your palette. So you might want to take the beginning of your riff and then come up with a different second part of it, and you just want to keep going like that. You just want to keep expanding on your riffs as much as possible. This is something that will come naturally eventually. The more that you're writing songs, the more you're going to come across certain patterns that you might use when you're putting these riffs together or your melodies. It's going to come naturally, so just keep writing essentially. You'll figure out your own sound eventually. And on that subject, don't be afraid to just write what comes organically. It might sound different to your references and stuff, but at the end of the day, this is your project and you just want to sound like yourself. So after you've come up with all your riffs and your variants of your riffs, you'll probably find that you've come together with quite a lot of material. And that's what you want essentially, because you want these different parts of these riffs to add into different riffs if you need to create some cohesion. So if you've got some riffs that aren't quite gelling together, you can start including certain tails of riffs you've had along the way in the song. Like you might want to put a little section into the bridge, stuff like that. So just give yourself as much stuff to work with as possible. So you might be hitting a brick wall trying to put two riffs together completely, and that's not a problem. What we can do is, I'll show you in my example with my song, is we can place that riff completely further from a riff that you're using, and gradually over the course of the song we can just implement little sections of that riff into the song, so when we build into it, it's like a natural progression. So a lot of that which we've just covered comes into the next section, which is structuring your song together. It can be where a lot of musicians actually struggle. They might be able to put the riffs together, they just might not be able to sort of move them about into the right places. But if we've built enough riffs and enough variants, then that shouldn't be too difficult. So writing riffs isn't going to be a problem for lots of people. It might be structuring that's the actual issue for them. For this, we can be pretty mindful when we're putting these riffs together. We can just picture, if we envision them as a chorus riff or a bridge riff or a verse riff, try to keep them into sections. So what you think sounds like a verse is in your verse section of riffs, what sounds like a chorus is in your chorus section, stuff like that. There's no rules for this. What sounds like a verse riff initially might end up being your bridge. Just whatever sounds best for the song. So you just want to keep moving stuff about and structuring it till it just sounds natural and cohesive. So after you've written a couple of basic songs, you want to start structuring with a bigger picture in mind. Now, for me, the easiest way to structure songs in their entirety is to try and picture where these songs work together. For that, I mean, you want to figure out that the song that you're writing, you need to start thinking, is this something that sounds like an intro song? Is it something that sounds like an outro song? Is it a song that sounds like it's in the middle? Is it going to be a fast or a quiet song? So with that in mind, you can say to yourself, if I've had a song that's had some quieter sections in previously, maybe I want this song that I'm writing to be more aggressive. You can start introducing more aggressive riffs into that. You've got an idea in your head of what your batch of songs, your EP or your album want to sound like. It's much easier to start writing to that. Again, this is something that's going to come naturally the more that you are writing songs. And if you are completely struggling with the structure of a song, maybe what you can do then is listen to some of your favorite songs and just listen to how that song is structured. I'm not saying start writing riffs that sound similar to the song that you're referencing. Just listen out for the structure. Is it starting quieter, having a heavy section, going quieter with a different sounding quiet riff, stuff like that. And then you can start using that as a template for riffs you've done. And with all these things in mind, songs are just going to come to you naturally in the end. So we could use something as an example, like two chefs in a restaurant. You might have a junior chef and a more experienced chef, and you've been asked to create a dish from scratch. The junior chef might need the ingredients placed in front of him to create an idea. In that case, that would be all the riffs that we've compiled. And then you might have the more experienced chef who's given one ingredient in front of him. He's able to use his knowledge, such as what season we're in, to start introducing stuff into the dish without even looking at ingredients. The way that that experienced chef will be thinking about seasons for stuff to include into the dish, we can start thinking, right, this riff that I've written, does it sound like an intro riff? Does it sound like a midsection? You can start building from there. If you've written enough songs, you'll be able to start introducing melodies. You'll just hear these things in your head. So to give you an example from my own work, on my Star Seer EP, the last song, Ex Infernus, it's about 9 minutes long, maybe a bit more. That all started from one riff that I took to the computer. So the quiet intro at the beginning, that was just what I recorded on. I literally just built from that, just using what I thought I could figure next in my head. With enough practice and repetition, you should start being able to producing songs pretty quickly, quicker than you thought you could. So the material that I have released, that all started to come about in August when I started writing, and all that's come out up to this point. There's a few riffs here and there that I had from demos in July that I added into songs, but in that short space of time, I've been able to produce that many songs. Whether these songs sound good is subjective to the individual, but people can't deny that these songs are rich in harmony and there's more riffs than you can count. Even if people don't like them, at the end of the day, you're writing this material for yourself, no one else. So next I'm going to showcase a song that I wrote for this video. Although that's not going to help you with your own riffs, I'm hoping that the mindset that I use when I approach these riffs and how I structure them is going to help you immensely. Okay, so this is the basic intro riff. So all I've started there is for the second part to the riff, I've just started adding different riffs. The good thing with that is when we were coming into the pre-chorus riff, if you can call it that there, is because it had these different sections, it built into it quite nicely. You might have a couple of riffs you've got in mind for your verse and chorus which don't quite gel. You just might want to consider adding a small section before the chorus where you're adding something that builds into it a little bit better. I'll touch on this pre-chorus riff in a second. So coming into what the second verse would be, I've just got a different verse riff again. Probably heard that one when I was coming up with riffs coming off the root note. coming into what would be the chorus section. Again, I showcased the bass riffs of that earlier. Now I wanted to touch on the pre-chorus riff for that. You'd probably notice that the second part of the chorus was actually in the pre-chorus. I just had a separate riff going over the top just to harmonize it in. And the reason I decided to do that was a riff that I'd written as a pre-chorus initially. Although it fitted the song and stuff, it just didn't have too much melody and it sounded a little bit boring. So sometimes you might need to come back to a section in your song. You might need to take it, build on it a little bit, and that's going to help build into the overall harmony. Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead further in the song. I'm going to showcase a riff that doesn't sound anything like the bass riffs, but I'm going to show you how I gelled that into the song. So that riff was inspired by All Shall Perish being in town recently. Didn't get a chance to go to the gig, which I was gutted about, but I just wrote that riff as a little bit of a homage to him. Getting it's out of the rules to use riffs influenced by your influences, as long as the overall song sounds like something that's your own. So if I go back to one of the first riffs I showed you earlier in the video with the basic harmony, which was this one. So all I'm doing with this section is I'm adding that first note that's in that riff in the song somewhere. So it's the same note. So we're just adding a little bit of context into the song, and gradually that's going to be coming into it. Just building depth. So this is a variant of that riff. It's a little bit more simple, but it's got different things going on. So that little section you heard at the end there, you would have heard something very similar in the very first riff I had going on. It's a very similar pattern, same group of notes. So having these little sections, it's just a way of tying in your song and gluing it all together. And then when we come back into that riff, because we've added small sections along the song, it sounds like a natural cohesion into the song. Now this song could have ended many different ways. I mean, picturing in my head, I probably could have gone back into the second verse I used. So if I wasn't doing instrumental music, I might have just figured to use that second verse riff again. If it had vocals over it, I'd be quite happy to finish the song off there. But the possibilities are endless if you're writing enough material. So what I've ended up doing instead is writing in another melody section. And this wasn't something I brought to the table, this is just something I had in my head. It's just something, a melody that I pictured would work in the song. And then when you can picture stuff in your head and you're working into your key, you can quickly find these notes and you can produce these melodies without even thinking about it. Okay, so just to recap, we want to come up with our initial riff. We next want to figure out what key that's in. We want to build as much variance of that riff as possible and all the other riffs, including the ones that are out of the roots notes and in the roots notes, just to give your song as much palette as possible. And then next we just want to work out and structure the song to what fits best. Forget if you're struggling to structure it, maybe move riffs later on in the song and build up to them, or use other songs you like as a reference for how those songs are structured. To be true to your own style of writing as much as possible, let it come organically, don't try to force riffs that just sound like the influences you like. Just be true to your songwriting and just write to that. So I don't really plan on doing any follow-up videos if I can help it. I'm hoping I've covered all the grounds in this video, but if something's not making sense or you've got a question about anything, you can just reach out to me on this or through comments in the socials. Yeah, I'm on there quite often. People might be wondering about lead work. I don't think I'm qualified to be teaching anyone lead guitar. I'd say that my lead style is quite economic. I just write what sounds good for the song as lazily as possible. I try not to do too much stuff if I can help it. With that being said, it's the exact same thing. You're just looking at the patterns that are in the key. You're just working out your own patterns. Eventually, you'll find your own lead playing style, much similar to what I have. You'll hear the same sort of things coming in and out of various songs. So whether you're a beginner or you're someone that's just fallen flat on your songwriting, I hope this has been intuitive to you. Have fun with it.